Welcome back to the program. If you're just joining us, this is Bottomline Africa, right on KTN News. Now, the United States Congress has now passed a bill to fund government operations for at least another 2 weeks, ending a 3-day-old government shutdown that threatened to do political damage to both parties. Now, the vote clears the way for President Trump to sign the measure into law, allowing thousands of federal employees to go back to work on Tuesday, that is today. Now, the Senate voted 81-18 on Monday to end the 3-day-old government shutdown, with Democrats joining Republicans to fund the government through February 8th in exchange for a promise from Republican leaders to address the fate of young undocumented immigrants known as dreamers. Of course, that is the basis of our discussion tonight. And few months ago, there was a luncheon hosted by President Donald Trump for leaders of 9 African countries. And that is where he made the famous comment referring to Namibia's Nambia. Let's listen to what he had to say then.
General, I appreciate it. And I'm greatly honored to host this lunch, to be joined by the leaders of Cote d'Ivoire, Ethiopia, Ghana, Guinea, Nambia, Nigeria, Senegal, Uganda, and South Africa. In particular, I want to thank President Condé, who is representing the African Union. Thank you. Thank you. In this room, I see partners for promoting prosperity and peace on a range of economic, humanitarian, and security issues. We hope to extend our economic partnerships with countries who are committed to self-reliance and to fostering opportunities for job creation in both Africa and the United States. Africa has tremendous business potential. I have so many friends going to your countries trying to get rich.
I have friends who want to get rich in Africa. That was the comment made by US President Donald Trump back then. In the studio, we have Nakia White, who is a managing partner, Global Ladder Africa. And she's going to talk to me more about the US-Africa relations. And just a reminder, right after that, we have Winnie Benyima, who is the Oxfam Executive Director. She's going to tell us more on the report they released on inequality in the world. And partly, she blamed the US president for the rise in inequality in the globe. Anyway, Nakia White, good evening and welcome to the program once again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Anyway, you've seen that comment made by Donald Trump a while back with regards to Africa. Is that necessarily how America sees Africa? It's a place that, people should come and, Americans should come and become rich?
Well, America has been known for pretty much since its inception of accepting immigrants. Is the land of the free, the land of the brave.
Yes.
Certainly immigrants come to the shore from all parts of the world to find better opportunities. I think this recent president, number 45, has a different view on immigration, clearly, which is partly why the government was shut down. But no, that is, I don't believe that is all of America's view, that immigrants aren't welcome in America. I just think that that's a very shallow and very nationalistic view. And certainly without immigrants, America wouldn't be what it is today. And so, yeah, yes, he's a little bit off.
That seems to be what Donald Trump presidency is all about. Actually, when he was campaigning, he was emphasizing on America America first. So how will that augur with, the rest of the world, including Africa?
Well, I think, listen, there's nothing different from what he campaigned about, which was very nationalistic, inward-looking. So I don't think that there's anything really different in his actions versus his campaign stomp. And if you look even, a lot of countries are starting to look inward and saying, hey, what can we do better? I mean, we just saw President Uhuru Kenyatta during his speech. He really looked at East Africa and Kenya and other African partners to really bolster trade and bolster economy. So I think for him, it's absolutely fair. But, the United States is certainly not a country that was built or is known for closing its borders, putting up walls, putting bans on Muslims. It's just just not a country that's known for that. And it's unfortunate that we have number 45 that consistently does or says something that's against people that are not like him.
And of course, we all remember the comment he made with regards to Africa and Haiti. We're going to talk about that shortly. And let's just talk about the US-Africa relationship once again. It has blossomed over the last 2 decades. So with the Trump presidency, how does the future look like?
Well, listen, let's look at the last year. In the last year, we still have a number of ambassadorial positions throughout Africa that remain open. We do not have a permanent secretary for African affairs. We have a temporary one. There's no policy. The only policy really regarding Africa is bolstering the military. And we saw kind of a really unfortunate decision where we had someone like David die in Niger, along with 2 or 3 other of his fellow military men. So in terms of what is happening with Africa, I'm not quite sure. And listen, the other thing is that, you know, humanitarian aid has been slashed significantly. We just saw the closing of the resource center at the U.S. Embassy today because of the congressional stalemate and the closing of government. So, you know, in terms of any future, I guess, benefit of America and Africa in terms of funding, I'm not hopeful in terms of that under this presidency. And let me take this a step further. We saw State Secretary Rex Tillerson, during one of his first meetings at the State Department, talk to his employees and say, we're going to take a trip around the world. At least that was the conversation was coined that way. But he did not mention 1.2 million people on the continent of Africa or Africa itself. So that really is telling as to where this administration is going and their thoughts around the African continent.
It seems nobody is quite sure about Donald Trump's administration, especially when it comes to Africa, as you've already mentioned. Do you think the U.S. stands to lose a lot? Because Africa, as you've already mentioned, has a population of about 1.2 billion people. You know, the economy is rising. I mean, will the U.S. lose?
Well, listen, the last 5 years, what we've seen is that the African continent is starting to look east and far east to places like India and China and Russia for some of their resources, whether it's importing or exporting resources, funding, loans, military weaponry. I mean, they're starting to kind of wing themselves from the dependency of U.S. foreign aid and U.S. connection. So I think if the U.S. is not careful in trying to build these relationships and keep these relationships, and let me add this, that Africa is incredibly important in helping to fight anti-terrorism or to help fight terrorism. And so once you alienate Africa in that way, it's not just alienating them, you know, economically, but it's also alienating your partners from fighting terrorism, something that has belabored the country for a couple of decades.
Well, Naki, I'm going to come back to you shortly, but I understand now we have the Oxfam International Executive Director, Winnie Byanyima, with us on phone. Now, Winnie, good evening. We've seen that report released by Oxfam, and apparently the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And in the report, of course, it paints a widening gap between the world's haves and the have-nots. How did we get here in the first place?
Well, yes, thank you for having me. Our report this year, inequality report, shows that the inequality crisis is reaching frightening new levels. And this is fueled by the actions of our politicians and our business leaders. Extreme wealth that we are seeing today for the few is built on the poverty wages and the low prices for the many. And women are the worst victims of this. Our report shows that 82% of new wealth that was created last year was captured by the top 1%. And the bottom 50% in the world, 3.7 billion, got zero increase in their wealth. Billionaires' wealth is increasing 6 times faster than the wages of ordinary people. All around the world, people are demanding for a more equal world. They want to see their hard work rewarded more than the people at the top who are rewarded just for being rich.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about the global wealth generated last year, in your report, it's very clear that 82% of the global wealth generated last year went to the richest 1% of the population, only 1%. I'm sure the billionaires are very happy because there has never been a better time to be a billionaire than now. So what do you think needs to be done to go around this?
You're so right. They're very happy. I'm sitting here in Davos. We are surrounded by snow, and the billionaires are here together with the politicians celebrating growth. They are happy.
Yes.
And they have every reason to be happy. But the truth is that the benefits of that growth has been captured by a few at the top. And the hard workers at the bottom have not benefited. And that's why I'm here also, to give them the facts. We know what needs to be done because we know where the problem is. The problem is that those with money, the shareholders, the big business people, insist on paying themselves first before paying workers a living wage. They insist on putting workers in very dangerous, inhuman conditions so that they can reap a lot of profits. They dodge paying their fair share of taxes. They put their money in tax havens and deny our government the chance to tax them so that money can come back to create, to put in health, in education, in roads, in communications. And they also deny us. They deny us the opportunity of more jobs, because if that money was not stashed somewhere hidden, it could go back in the business to create more jobs.
Yes.
So they also deny us jobs. Now, we want governments to come back in the driver's seat and run the economy for the benefit of the majority, not to just sit there slashing taxes for the rich, silencing workers, taking away their rights of protesting, their rights of organizing.
Yes.
I mean, our governments are working for the rich. They're not working for our people.
Yes. And
Winnie,
sorry. Yes, Winnie, sorry to cut you short. Earlier, we've been discussing or talking about the US-Africa relationship. And again, in the Oxfam report, apparently 65% of the global wealth generated are in Europe and America and just 2% in Africa. This is a very huge disparity. And I heard you earlier blaming US President Donald Trump for this. And how is this going to affect the relationship between Africa as a continent and the US going forward?
Now, you are raising many issues at the same time. I'll talk about two.
Yes.
One, President Trump is not unique. He represents a trend that we see in the world. That trend we call political capture, where very rich people take over the control of governments and then run the government for their own personal benefits and not for the benefit of the majority. That's what we are seeing in America with Trump. The first law he has made is that of cutting taxes for the top 1%, cutting taxes for those who will inherit wealth. They will inherit it without paying a lot of tax. Companies will get away without paying their fair share. That's the first law he has made for the billionaires, not a law for the poor. So this is the trend we are seeing even in Africa, where wealthy people capture power and then use the power to benefit themselves. And we are saying that political capture must end. We must resist that. Then you raise another issue about Africa and America and Europe. Well, on that question, African leaders and African people, we must ask ourselves. Here I am sitting in Davos. This is the place where the economic and political leaders of the whole world have gathered. And they are here influencing each other and making commitments to each other on how to run the global economy.
Yes.
The Africans are missing. Today, there are more Africans than ever before, but still, we are not many here. Why? because our share of the global economy is so small.
Yes.
And why is it small? Because the managers of our economies are incompetent, are corrupt, and do not manage the economy so that they grow and benefit everybody. We need more competent managers of our economy. And we need leaders who are committed to our people, not who are benefiting the few rich and who are in a cozy bed with rich people.
Well said, Winnie. One final question. Of course, more and more leaders are concerned about the inequality, not just the equality, but what many have referred to as excessive inequality. So you've already mentioned governments can play a role in shrinking this, as you know, as much as they're doing their job well. So which countries perhaps are the most affected by this, and perhaps going to give us names of the countries in Africa that have been directly affected?
In fact, at Oxfam, we have come up with an indicator which we call the commitment to reduce inequality. And we have ranked 154 countries in the world against this indicator. This indicator assesses how much a government is committed to making growth inclusive, to reducing inequality. And it assesses their policies on social spending, lifting education, health, social protection. It assesses how progressive their taxation is. Are they taxing the rich or are they passing the burden of tax to the poor? And then it also assesses how they treat their workers. Is the government ensuring that workers get a minimum wage? So those three areas are assessed. And when we rank these countries, we find that actually you can find poor countries fighting harder to spread the wealth, to make sure that poor people are lifted out of poverty. And you can find rich countries like America ranking low because their whole economy is about benefiting the few at the top. So if you look at Africa, we find that a country like Namibia has made a strong commitment to reduce inequality. It is taxing the rich more and putting the money more on giving universal primary and secondary education, giving health. So you find that that country, although it was very unequal because of the kind of apartheid they had, because, they were colonized by apartheid South Africa.
Yes.
In spite of that, they are making big strides towards equality. We also find that in a country like Kenya, there are some good examples of business models that have a purpose that bring benefit to people. For example, we found that you have your Kenya Tea Development Agency. Through that agency, 550,000 small-scale tea farmers coming together in that agency are now receiving over 75% of the final tea price. Meanwhile, in Rwanda, where they don't have such a cooperative business model, their tea farmers in Rwanda are getting only 25% of the final price. So that's a good example from Kenya of businesses that benefit poor people. So we have good examples in different countries of Africa, but on the whole, I have to say, we have leaders who are sleeping on the switch. They are not managing the economies for their ordinary people. They're managing the economies to benefit the big investors and their rich friends.
Yes. I think you've delivered your point. Many thanks, Winnie, for your input. Of course, Winnie is the Oxfam International Executive Director. They're speaking to me on phone. Unfortunately, we couldn't get her on Skype, as I've earlier promised, because of some technological hitch. But she has already made her point. Tax the rich more and put the money in education as well as health. In the studio, we still have Nakia White. Nakia, one final question before we end our interview tonight. Unfortunately, we're out of time. There's a report here. According to research done by the South African Institute of International Affairs, there has been a dramatic decline in African confidence in the U.S. President Donald Trump. Did you see this coming? And perhaps is this because of some of the sentiments he has been making openly about with regards to Africa?
I mean, it would be kind of a natural response to the world leader talking or speaking poorly of a third world country for which they have enriched themselves, or America has enriched themselves so greatly through slavery, through trade, through gold. So certainly the leader of the free world, if he speaks ill of a continent for which his country was made on, it makes sense that other people will, or other world leaders, or the economy, the global economy, will listen to that. And certainly listening to Winnie from Oxfam, I'm just floored by the results that she mentioned, and certainly, you know, being endorsed where she is, and having to speak to probably a group of white men who are controlling the global economy, and we have no black and brown faces there, is really disheartening to me. And the facts that she mentioned about having competent leaders throughout Africa that will help its people and its economy, I think is important. It's especially important to the future of Africa.
Yes, Nakia, of course, that is a very damning report by Oxford. Of course, once again, for our viewers, according to that report, 82% of the global wealth generated last year went to just 1% of the population. A very interesting report indeed by Oxfam. Many thanks, Nakia, as always, for your input. Nakia White is a managing partner from Global Ladder Africa. And before we end the show tonight, we're going to, of course, end the show by paying tribute to one of Africa's greatest performing artists that ever lived. Here is the elect Yoweri Museveni performing one of his signature hits, quote unquote, "Bring Him Back Home," referring to Nelson Mandela, I'm sure. And that is during a concert in Harare back in 1987. That was when I was